Hello, my friends. I'm State Representative Tom Calter. Welcome to Issues of the Day. This is a program where we try and get at either the more complex or perhaps even the more controversial issues that we're faced with every single day. As we're doing this recording, it's late August, and the market, the stock market, has had its worst performance the sixth worst performance in the history of the country. And it seems like there are markets all around the world that are in free fall. The China market, the China trade is off by magnificent proportions. Europe is struggling. Russia is threatening to become a third world economy. And so we know that world affairs like that, while interesting, are probably above our pay grade or our ability to impact the outcome in any way. But right here in the region, in Plymouth County, in the Plymouth region, and the surrounding towns, we do have the ability to affect our own local economy. And so I'm really pleased today to have as a guest a new friend, Jessica Casey, who's the Plymouth Regional Economic Development Foundation Director. Welcome, Jess. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Representative.
Thanks for coming.
Appreciate it.
Now, Jess, we were talking off air. You're fairly new to Plymouth.
I am.
A year. How do you like it?
I love Plymouth. I absolutely love Plymouth. When we had the opportunity to move here a year ago, we were absolutely over the moon about it, and we knew that Plymouth had many opportunities to offer a young family like ours. A year later, we're surprised every day by what those new opportunities bring and by all of the wonderful, unique characteristics that Plymouth has. We're just blessed to be a part of the community.
Well, we're delighted to have you. I've had the privilege, folks, of working with Jess in several meetings in the year she's been here, and you've been a real refreshing addition to the community, not only in terms of your personality, but in terms of your intellect. You had an opportunity, I know, to work with Secretary Bielecki, our most recent Secretary of Economic Development.
That's correct. So for Secretary Bielecki, I focused on different policies that the administration was working on, the Patrick administration. Specifically, I was the Policy Development and Implementation Director, and it was a really great opportunity for me to be able to see the 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts, what they're doing when it comes to multifamily housing and housing production goals, how different communities are implementing best practices to get there, and the different tools that are available at the state level. Of course, with the Baker administration, some of those tools have changed, and they're very exciting changes.
Are you adjusting?
We are, absolutely. Definitely Plymouth has had a chance to meet with Governor Baker, as well as Lieutenant Governor Polito, and really excited about the policies that are coming down through the administration.
Well, very good. The foundation, I understand, is a nonprofit. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And it's a regional foundation. So please give us some understanding, Jess, as to how it's structured and what the goals of the foundation are, and what towns, how broad, how wide is the region that you deal with?
Right now, we are working directly with the town of Plymouth. However, it is the Plymouth Regional Economic Development Foundation. We have a board of trustees. It's been in place, the nonprofit, for a number of years. It's an amalgamation of different organizations that have changed throughout the years. The mandate and the mission statement for the foundation is to think about economic development at a regional level, be able to understand the industry sectors that are growing, understand how to diversify the tax base, understand how to grow jobs here in Plymouth and also across the region. It's a group of very great people, many partnerships, and right now the nonprofit is partnered directly with the town of Plymouth, as I said, offering and providing services that relate to economic development.
Now, how is it different, just from perhaps the chamber?
Sure.
Different missions, same missions? Do you work collaboratively?
Absolutely. So Kevin O'Reilly is the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce. He's absolutely wonderful. We work very closely with him. In addition, we also work very closely with the executive director of Destination Plymouth, Paul Cripps, as well as the executive director of Plymouth 400, Michelle Pecoraro. But when it comes to the chamber and the foundation, they differ because the chamber really focuses on existing business and how to provide them with the workforce skills and programs that they may need, as well as thinking about capital programs. So when we think of the Chamber of Commerce, it's what is the existing base of businesses that we have? What do they look like? How do they fall across different industry sectors? And what kind of resources they might need? For me, I'm really the bridge between business and town government or municipal government, state government. So in my role, I often think about what do businesses need as far as being able to work through the municipal system or work through the state system to be able to open and do business in the region. A lot of that may have to do with learning about access to capital programs. A lot of it is financing for infrastructure projects, thinking about really how to set a platform for economic development growth, new growth, incremental growth in the future.
It seems to me, just from the meetings I've been in with you, that there's this real focus on vision as well, on the future of the region. As you look, and I'm always interested in this because you're a newbie in Plymouth, which is very refreshing. As you look at Plymouth and the region, what potential, what do you see for our future? What vision do you have? We know about tourism. We cherish our tourism. Our tourism is important to us. We're America's hometown. And the towns around us, immediately around us, from Kingston to Duxbury to Carver to Wareham, are all rich in their natural resources and rich in their history.
Absolutely.
And people come from far and wide to see the plantation and the waterfront and to see the rock. And then they get here and they say it's a rock. And we say, no kidding. We said it was a rock. We know what we have in terms of our economy, our economic model. Where do you see our future? How can we do better from an economic development, from a prosperity perspective? If you were to just flip all the cards and say, hey, I'm the mayor for the day of the whole region, where do you think we've got potential as we work towards the 400th?
Yeah, I think, in my mind, what I try to do is understand what unique characteristics Plymouth may have or the region may have compared to other areas across Massachusetts. And there are a number of different areas for opportunity. You're absolutely right when you say that a lot of the thinking that I do is more strategic and more vision setting, thinking about where we want to go long term and how we want to get there.
Somewhat outside the box.
Now, when I think of Plymouth and its assets and the assets of the region, I often think of, well, first and foremost, we have the land area that nobody else in Massachusetts has here in Plymouth. We have 96 square miles of land, over 30 miles of coastline. I'm not really sure what other town in Massachusetts can say that for themselves.
That's right.
As you said, tourism is the #1 economy and the #1 industry here. However, as somebody who's moved into Plymouth, it always amazes me at how strong the community is and how strong the traditional industry sectors are. So lobstermen, fishing fleets, cranberry. When we think of the opportunities that we see in the industry park, whether it be the Plymouth Industrial Park. So when we think of Camelot Park and the Industrial Park, we have areas that we have clustered development.
Right.
So Tom, when I think about it, I think of, well, what does the master plan look like? And what are we thinking as far as long-term visioning? And how do we build on those principles? For those that don't know, Plymouth does have a master plan. It talks about clustering development. It talks about creating opportunities for economic development, utilizing existing infrastructure, and a number of other very important principles. So when I think of those strengths in Plymouth, I often think, well, how do we use those to the greatest extent we can, and how do we balance growth with open space and thinking about ecotourism and thinking about really the natural resources that Plymouth has. Now, there are challenges that Plymouth has as well. One of those is the excess levy capacity, thinking about that. A second is we have a very limited number of industrial and commercial parcels left. And I know a lot of people may not think of that in the forefront because we have such great area, such great land area. However, it is a really large concern thinking about how we move forward.
Right.
And I would say the third is the workforce gap. So the businesses that are here in Plymouth today, if they would like to grow, what type of skill set are they looking for, and how are we ensuring that that workforce is here? I think that from an economic development standpoint, long term, Plymouth has so many different opportunities that for new growth, but also parcels that might be underutilized. So when we think of the waterfront, and we think of our village centers, and we think of areas that are already developed, are they developed to their fullest potential?
Good point.
And when we think of cluster development, are we thinking that that is the development that we would like to see? And if not, how do we focus our attention on those opportunities to be able to drive growth in those areas while increasing employment opportunities at the same time?
When we talk about development, and really this question I'm going to ask you comes from a position of real ignorance on my part. We're so well known for our tourism industry and our service industry. Is the development in the industrial sector, let me rephrase that, is industrial development mutually exclusive from the service industry? Can you have both? Are you familiar with regions that have a strong tourism industry, strong service industry, and also have some greater capacity for industrial development?
Absolutely, for sure. I think one of the areas that probably the viewers are the most familiar with would be Worcester region. And so when we think of Worcester region, for example, it has all of those things that are happening in connection with one another. Here, when we think of tourism, it's clearly the largest industry sector.
Right.
However, part of my thinking and part of the reason why I'm here is to think of how to diversify that industry base and how to think about Plymouth as multifaceted and how we can really utilize the growth in different sectors. Now, one example is the industrial park has seen change over the last little while. When Jordan Hospital was taken over by Beth Israel, we saw a number of the structures in the industrial park change over to medical offices. We've seen an evolution in the way that Plymouth has grown.
Right.
And we've seen an evolution in the way that different office space and commercial space has been used. Now we also have an advanced manufacturing sector here. We have folks like Cadence in the industrial park. We have Flexo Concepts, Smart Pack. So we have different types of companies, although maybe not all of our residents know exactly what those look like. When we think of the village centers and the real community and sense of cohesion and fabric that those types of areas bring versus these more densely commercial and industrial areas, it really blends well to be able to see how Plymouth can offer all of those things or have all of those things going on within the municipality. And this exists for the region too. I mean, this is not just a Plymouth, it's not just the way that Plymouth grows, it's the way that the region grows as a whole.
How would you respond to this question with respect to workforce development? I've heard this governor and the previous governor speak in eloquent fashion on the need to build our workforce to support the growing economy. In this region in particular, we're trying to get a campus from UMass down into Duxbury. Massasoit now has a small setting right here in Plymouth. Developing our workforce, to me, seems to be a real challenge for businesses across the Commonwealth. Here in this area, when you talk to CEOs, how do they feel about the workforce development challenge? Are they having difficulty recruiting good, high-quality, trained people?
Yes, I believe they are. I know that this has been a focus for the state administration, whether it be the Patrick administration and now currently the Baker administration. A big piece of that, that puzzle that we've heard of for such a long time is really the affordable housing component. And we've seen many housing production goals, whether they be set across the state or they be set in the city of Boston itself, that really drive housing production. Here in Plymouth and in the region, we're actually in pretty good shape when it comes to housing affordability. Now, I'm not saying that every family is able to move into the region if they just choose to. However, when we look at the median home value in Plymouth itself, we're sitting at about 309,000, which is very competitive compared to the region
Certainly.
as a whole, especially, if we travel north and get closer to the city of Boston.
Then it's downright cheap compared to the urban areas.
So I think that I'm glad that you bring this up, because I think that it's a very important piece. Now, here in Plymouth, we've done a lot for housing production, clearly between the Pine Hills, as well as different smaller housing production initiatives, such as the Registry, the Armory, a few different sites that are downtown that really support connectivity and walkability and really bring a vitality to the downtown area. We're seeing that increase in housing production. Now, one of the initiatives that we've been working on is Cordage Park. As many people know, Cordage Park was designated as a Chapter 40R district in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
That means that by right, there are 675 residential units approved for that site. It sounds like a lot, it is a lot, but if we can imagine North Plymouth with having 1,500 more people that would live in those 675 housing units, we can understand the vitality and the potential workforce population that would come. Now, Representative Calter, I'll give you a couple of stats that are near and dear to my heart.
You're a stat girl.
I do love stats. So over the last 15 years, Plymouth has grown by 9%, and that's approximately 5,000 people. Now, the interesting thing is that the workforce population has grown almost 20% in that same time period. But the interesting thing about that is that that's also 5,000 people. So for the growth that Plymouth has seen over the last 15 years,
mm-hmm.
those are all workforce population residents.
Interesting.
So when we think of the opportunity for Plymouth and for the region, and we think of Cordage Park, for example, or some of the other housing production opportunities that are out there, we really want to drive to be able to be marketable and be able to bring those working families in. Those working families are looking for quality of life. Plymouth has quality of life.
It certainly does.
The CEOs are looking for workforce. So if the CEOs can find the workforce and the employees know that the quality of life is here, then we're going to be in really good shape.
Well, that begs the next question. Workforce is critical. Mm-hmm. Demand is critical. Workforce capacity is critical. How about infrastructure? Mm-hmm. And do you, as part of the economic development challenge, what keeps you up at night? Is it workforce development or infrastructure upgrades, or both?
So both for me, partially because the workforce skill set is much more personal based, right? We can picture families that are working 80 hours a week that are trying to make ends meet and just are not able to do it. They need skill upgrades. They have families that they're trying to provide for, they're trying to be a part of the community, and they only have so many hours a week to be able to do all of those things. So for me, the workforce skill set piece is a real personal piece that you can see, you can feel. We all know people who work very hard. And it's inspiring, but at the same time, it's concerning. On the infrastructure piece, that keeps me up as well. There's a real lack of dollars out there, and the competitiveness of the programs that are out there at the state level and the federal level to be able to fund the infrastructure projects that are at the local level are getting to be fewer and fewer. This is part of the regionalization that we're focused on, thinking regionally, how state investments and federal investments really make a difference on a regional level, not just a local level. How can we partner with communities to be able to drive a change that is beneficial for everyone, not just one community at a time?
Right. Jess, tell me about the community compact and our level of participation.
Sure. So this is something that is a state-driven initiative.
Okay.
The administration, Governor Baker, signed an executive order in January of this year. Mm-hmm. That executive order mandates or speaks to a partnership between Massachusetts communities and the state.
Okay.
And what it means is it's a voluntary agreement where municipalities work with the state, partner with the state to implement best practices that help the municipalities function at a higher level.
For instance?
For example, As part of the Plymouth's Community Compact agreement with the state, we focused on 3 best practices. The first best practice is preparing for success. That's an economic development best practice. What that speaks to is, well, how do we partner with all of the academic institutions in the region? How do we partner with different communities in the region? Do we have a plan? Do we have a workforce plan? Do we know what the gap is in skill? Do we know what CEOs need to be successful? And do employees know what they need to be successful? And how do we bridge that gap? How do we bring everyone together and work in more of a partnership style?
And before you go to the other 2, when you talk about prepare for success, what immediately comes to mind is Kendall Square in Cambridge. There was, it seems to me, somewhat of a lack of preparation for success. So all of the biotechs clustered here,
Yeah.
and yet they couldn't grow because they were constrained by a lack of a workforce.
Yes.
So is that what you mean by that, in
It
terms
is.
of preparing for success?
Yes, that is what it means. It means understanding where you are and where you want to go, and
Right.
how everybody has owns a piece of that puzzle or owns a piece of that journey. So is there a way that as a community we can partner with the academic institutions to say, hey, we have a bunch of companies that
Right.
require a certain skill set. You're obviously offering a number of certificate programs,
get out
and
in
how do
front
we
of it.
bring this all together?
Another great example of that is there's a great demand for medical technology, for imaging and so forth. And when I first came to office 9 years ago, I had a number of constituents, young ladies in particular, that were applying to the imaging program at local colleges. And it was interesting, and it was very rewarding the way the colleges responded to this challenge. There were folks coming out of Silver Lake or Plymouth North with 4.0 CUMEs, applying for a 2-year degree from Massasoit for imaging, X-ray technicians. And there were only 8 seats in the class.
Yeah.
But yet there were 48 seats in the agriculture class, a worthy industry, and happy for that. But technology has replaced, in the agriculture field, technology has replaced or supplanted many of the important old style jobs, and those instructors didn't have the students
Yeah.
in the agricultural field, but we couldn't transfer those resources over to the imaging field. So they weren't ready for the success that came upon us with an explosion in demand for imaging that was driven by technology. And God love Dr. Wall. He recognized it, he took action, and now we're able to serve that community. But planning for the future, which was an economic development challenge, it was a healthcare challenge, was very critical. And I see it happening around us every day now. And it remains a challenge. And I think whoever made the decision to form the foundation and to bring you on board recognize that, and my hat's off to whoever that may be. There were 2 other components to the compact.
Absolutely. The second is job creation and retention.
Okay.
Okay, and this is thinking about, well, what is the region strong in as far as industry sectors? Which sectors are growing? Which sectors are declining? Which sectors have changed? And how do we establish an understanding of what those are, and how do we really target those businesses and those industries that we would like here? Now, the viewers may know, but the Board of Selectmen of Plymouth voted not too long ago to enter into a partnership with Northeastern University. Now, the Old Colony Planning Council, which is our regional planning agency, funded through a district local technical assistance grant Plymouth to be able to participate with Northeastern to complete an economic development self-assessment tool. It's a lot of terminology. However, what it means is that Plymouth will be taking part in an online self-assessment tool. Now, the amazing thing about that is that it is designed to really take a look at how many buildable lots are in Plymouth, what the parking situation is, but it also looks at internal streamlining and internal permitting and licensing. So how long does it take for residents to get a permit? How long does it take for business to go through that process? What is the number of days? The output of that exercise is that Plymouth will be compared to 100 other communities that have completed that assessment tool. 73 of those communities are based in Massachusetts. So what the outcome of that whole exercise will be is understanding where Plymouth has strengths, Plymouth needs attention, which parts we should be prioritizing, and how we can be working together with partners, and how we can be thinking a little bit wider at the region, and how we can make change. Now, I say that because part of what that assessment will look at is what sectors are strong, which sectors are growing, how do we want to focus our attention, and how do the traditional industry sectors play a role in that. Now for us, in Plymouth, what I feel like is that technology is such a huge piece. We have all of these STEM components when we think of academia at this point in time. I also like to think of, well, where do the trades fit in, right?
There you go.
In 10 years, when I need service done on something in my home, who will I call? Will I call an electrician that also has some sort of STEM education background certificate? What will that look like, and how do trades fit into the whole STEM components and different programming? But for us, as I said, we have access to over 30 miles of coastline. Plymouth really has the opportunity to be a hub for all of these different academic institutions that are surrounded in the region. How are they focused on marine programs? How are they focused on different coastal management? And what sectors are increasing their use of technology, and what role can Plymouth play in that?
And we're running out of time, Jen, so can you get to the third component of the compact?
Absolutely. The third component is sustainable development and land protection. Now, in my mind, economic development and land protection go together. They go together because we want to increase open space, but we also want to increase economic development.
And there are limited resources.
When we have limited resources and we have limited land that's zoned as commercial and industrial, we need to understand where we can grow, how we can grow, and how to utilize parcels that may currently be underutilized today.
Jen, very quickly, are there other local communities that are as active in the planning stage with you as Plymouth is?
Currently, no, not today. They're not. However, I feel as though once we complete our EDSAT, which is the self-assessment tool, it will really point to communities that have best practices in place for things that we need to focus on here.
Okay.
And I feel as though that will be a great opportunity to reach out to those specific communities.
And do you know, are there other communities in the region that are involved with or participating in the community compact?
My understanding is that the state has an influx of applications that they're processing, over 60 at this current time.
Good.
When we made the decision to enter into the agreement, when the Board of Selectmen voted, there were only 6 communities across the state that were part of that agreement.
As usual, Plymouth was way out in front.
You got it.
We're going to have to wrap it up. Did it fly by?
It flew by.
I can tell you what, folks, you should know that regional economic development doesn't happen by accident. It requires very highly trained, smart people like Jess. I think I called you Jen a minute ago. Like Jess, who have been trained to do this type of work. I got to tell you, Jess, we're very, very pleased to have you in Plymouth. The work you're doing is extraordinary. We're all becoming enlightened, and we don't ever want another economic downturn. But I think with your efforts, should we face one, Plymouth, as usual, will survive like it always has. So thank you so much for joining me. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you very much.
And have a great weekend.
You too.
Okay.